My world was framed by the scent of ancient pine forests and the deep, steady, reassuring rumble of my father's laughter. He was Alpha Corvin of the Silverwood Pack, and though my mother, a gentle, scholarly Omega, had died when I was barely old enough to shift a paw, his strength had always been my absolute shield. He never saw my status as an Omega, the lowest rank, often tasked with healing and peace, as a weakness. "The pack needs strength, Elara," he would tell me, brushing my hair back from my forehead. "But it needs wisdom more. Your rank, my little one, is the foundation of pack diplomacy. The one who can feel the hurts of all ranks is the truest leader." But the protection of the Alpha heart stopped the day the strange, wasting fever took him. The healer's efforts were futile. The sound of his final breath was the silence that swallowed my life whole. I was barely 18 and utterly alone. My wolf had not fully manifested. I was known as a late shift, a fragility my stepmother, Lady Seraphina, was quick to exploit. Seraphina was a beautiful, politically astute beta who had married my father late in his life. The pack viewed her with wary respect, but I saw only the cold ambition in her eyes. The morning after the funeral pyre was lit, the smoke still staining the crisp mountain air, the palace, my ancestral home, became a tomb of frozen silence. I stood in the great hall, still clad in mourning black, when Seraphina appeared. She radiated a calculated, icy power that seemed to leach the warmth from the very stones. "The pack cannot afford sentimentality, Elara," she announced, her voice too smooth, too loud in the empty hall. "You are unstable. Your Omega wolf has not appeared. The Silverwood Pack requires a swift, strong alpha hand, not the trembling fingers of a child in mourning." Before sunset, the guards, who had once bowed their heads to me, silently stripped away every visible sign of my heritage. The Alpha signet ring, heavy with generations of power, was wrenched from my finger. My rooms, the high, sunlit chambers overlooking the training fields, were immediately locked, the key handed to her favored cousin. I was given a rough, coarse tunic and banished to the drafty, frigid servant quarters near the kitchens. The humiliation was a physical agony, a constant, low-level thrumming beneath my skin. I was the heir, the daughter of the Alpha, yet I was forced to scrub the very marble floors where I had learned to run. I was a slave in my own palace. Every day, I faced the scorn of the minor betas and the indifference of the council. Imagine this. You are standing in the home your ancestors built, a building that echoes with your family's history, and you are ordered to kneel and scrub the dirt from the boots of the people who now look at you like vermin. That was my reality. Yet in that deep, burning shame, my father's diplomatic training became my involuntary armor. I vowed that I would not be broken. If I could not fight with alpha might, I would survive through unyielding composure and strategic silence. My shame would not break me. It would harden me into something resilient, something they would never see coming. Welcome back to Lily's Heart Tales, where the price of love is paid every single day. If you're new here, tap that subscribe button now and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss out on any of our stories. Kindly tell us in the comment where you are watching from and share your favorite part of the story. Chapter 1. The grand Silverwood Palace, which had once felt like a warm embrace, became a labyrinth of echoing scorn. My life was now defined by the relentless cycle of servitude, a calculated degradation enforced by Lady Seraphina. My quarters, once a sunny chamber high in the western tower, were now a damp, cold alcove near the root cellar, filled with the pervasive, sickening smell of decay and cleaning lye. My days were built around the two cardinal rules of Seraphina's regime: maximum visibility and maximum humiliation. My service began before the sun touched the peaks. I was forced to sweep and stir the ashes of the great central hearth, my rough tunic blackened with soot, symbolizing my fall. Then came the cleaning of the ceremonial silverware, hundreds of pieces bearing the sacred Silverwood crest. My father's silver wolf, which I had once been taught to polish with reverence, I now scrubbed with frantic desperation just to finish before dawn. The caustic cleaning fluid ate at the skin of my hands, leaving them raw, perpetually cracked and stinging. Seraphina ensured that my primary duties were the most menial and physically demanding, tasks traditionally reserved for the weakest omegas or the human auxiliaries. "She strains under the weight of a simple bucket," I overheard her sneer to the head beta one morning as I struggled to carry water up the main staircase. How could such an unstable heir, who lacks even a rudimentary wolf form, defend our borders from the northern packs? The very labor proves her inherent fragility. This public declaration of my unshifted status was her sharpest political weapon. In a pack built on primal strength, my omega rank was bad enough, but an unshifted omega was seen as a biological failure, a stain on the alpha bloodline. The worst test came during the nightly Alpha Council dinners. I was commanded to serve the wine, a heavy, crimson vintage that threatened to slosh over the rim of the pitcher with every trembling step. Seraphina never missed her cue. "Elara, daughter of the former Alpha," she would say, her voice a chillingly audible purr, directing the attention of the stoic, serious pack elders toward my ragged state. "Be sure you wipe the rim of the glass thoroughly. We must maintain standards, even when dealing with our lowest servants. Do try to keep your hands steady. We wouldn't want to waste good vintage on the floor." The air would thicken with pity, disdain, and uncomfortable silence. The shame of being publicly scrutinized, of having my lineage used as a tool of mockery, was a fire in my gut. But I remembered my father's quiet philosophy. Composure is a stronger shield than fury. I perfected my service. My tray never shook. My steps were silent. My movements were precise, almost ceremonial. My eyes were always downcast, masking the burning intelligence beneath. I gave them no reason to punish me, no weakness to exploit, and no word to twist. By being flawlessly and stoically subservient, I was proving that while my body was captive and my title stolen, my inner dignity, the true spirit of an heir, was untouchable. My shame was not breaking me. It was teaching me how to survive an open political war with nothing but a pitcher of wine in my hands. The humiliation during the day was a slow poison, but the nights, those quiet, stolen hours, became my sanctuary and my school. I was meant to sleep exhausted, but the fear of permanent subjugation burned away my fatigue. While the palace slept, I crept into the hidden corners of the manor, performing my assigned chores in the cold silence. My cleaning tasks often took me to the old, neglected parts of the palace that Seraphina deemed beneath her attention. The cavernous, forgotten pack library, now used as a storage shed for moth-eaten furs and dusty crates. It was there, amidst the gloom and the scent of aged paper, that hope found me. One chilly evening, as I was sweeping the heavy dust from the perimeter shelves, a shadow detached itself from the gloom. It was Gamma Ronan, my father's most trusted advisor. Ronan was a formidable, silver-muzzled warrior, but now he looked like a weary ghost. He was too old to challenge Seraphina directly, yet his eyes burned with fierce loyalty. "You need to know who you are, child," Ronan murmured, his voice barely a breath, rough with suppressed emotion. He glanced nervously toward the exit. "She has poisoned the council's ear. She claims your father planned to name a successor before the fever took him. A complete lie." He slipped a thick, tattered volume wrapped in hardened leather into my cleaning sack, a volume I instantly recognized as my father's private pack journal and codex. It was the true history, the wisdom passed only from Alpha to heir. "This is the key to your lineage," he continued, pressing a small, smooth silver charm into my palm, a miniature carving of the silverwood crest. "Guard this. It is a piece of home and a reminder. Most importantly, study the section on the old hunting trails, the airy trails. Seraphina has sealed all the main training grounds, but those high-altitude paths are secrets only the Alpha blood knew. They are your only escape, and perhaps your training ground." Ronan's loyalty was the first true act of kindness I had received since my father's passing, and it felt like a jolt of life. It was confirmation that I was not completely abandoned, and that the diplomatic approach, my unwavering composure, had earned the respect of a true loyalist. That night, hiding beneath a threadbare blanket, I didn't just read history, I absorbed strategy. The Silverwood Codex detailed not only the Pack's true covenants, but also the strategic responsibilities of the Omega, not just peace, but the quiet defense of the Pack's spiritual heart. The airy trails, marked meticulously on hand-drawn maps, were a complex, almost impossible network of goat paths circling the mountain peaks, far above the guarded valley floor. The knowledge was the spark that ignited a quiet, furious rebellion in my heart. I realized I had been handed not just a book, but diplomatic ammunition. The information on the airy trails gave me a means of physical escape and secret training, and the knowledge of Seraphina's lies gave me the political leverage I needed. I was no longer just cleaning floors. I was the secret custodian of the Pack's truth, waiting for the moment to use the tools my father and his loyal Gamma had secured for me. Chapter 2. Seraphina was not content with mere servitude. She wanted to erase the very memory of my Alpha lineage from the Pack's psyche. Her strategy shifted from simple chores to public degradation, designed to justify her political takeover. The Pack needs to see the difference between strength and fragility, she declared at a minor Pack meeting, her voice carrying the false authority of a beta attempting to fill an alpha vacuum. She began enforcing specific, antiquated Omega duties on me, tasks that were reserved only for those deemed spiritually or physically incapable of contributing to the Pack's defense. The worst was the mandatory cleaning of the kennels and the waste disposal pits. This was deliberate. It forced me to be seen covered in grime and reeking of waste, emphasizing my lowest status. One afternoon, while I was hauling a heavy barrel of refuse, Seraphina brought a visiting delegation from a neighboring minor Pack right past me. She stopped, feigning surprise. "Ah, Elara," she said, her voice dripping with mock pity. "So hard-working. You see, esteemed guests, this is the tragedy of Silverwood. Our Alpha's daughter, bless her heart, is simply too Omega, too soft and too late to shift, to lead. Her wolf is a shadow. She is by necessity relegated to the chores her temperament allows. She is useful, yes, but only on the fringe." Her words were far more damaging than any physical blow. They weren't just insults, they were diplomatic poison. By publicly framing my Omega rank as a fundamental flaw rather than a necessary balance, she systematically undermined my claim to the throne in the eyes of external Packs, making Silverwood look vulnerable and necessitating a stronger replacement. The sheer weight of this psychological war was crushing. It was a daily battle to keep my gaze steady and my composure intact. There were times, scrubbing the cold stones in the dark, when the loneliness was so profound I wanted to scream and tear off the servant's tunic. But I clung to the silver charm Ronan had given me, focusing on the hidden maps in the Codex. My mind, fueled by the strategic knowledge, refused to surrender. I understood that if I allowed myself one angry outburst, one visible break in my calm demeanor, Seraphina would use it as irrefutable proof of my instability and exile me immediately. My endurance, my unwavering, silent poise under this intense pressure was my true Alpha inherited strength, the first, most crucial step in my long diplomatic game of reclaiming the throne. I was surviving by being flawlessly subservient, all while secretly plotting my move from the lowest rank. My father's codex mentioned the rare necessity of ironroot moss, a potent but highly dangerous natural sedative for severe pack injuries, which grew only in the shadowy, untamed heart of the eastern woods. This area was strictly forbidden. It bordered the territory of known rogue packs and was thick with territorial markers of true alphas. Seraphina, knowing the danger, seized the opportunity. "Our medicine stores are low, Elara," she announced with a false sigh of concern. "Since you are so adept at scavenging and surviving in the dirt, you may retrieve the ironroot moss. Fail to return with it by sunset, and you will be presumed a deserter, which is treason. It was a blatant attempt to force my death or exile, but it was also my only chance to leave the confines of the palace walls. Clutching the directions from the codex, I slipped out at midday, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The eastern woods swallowed the sunlight. The air grew heavy and primal, thick with the scent of wild, untamed wolves. I moved silently, relying on my omega sensitivity to the environment. I found the moss growing deep within a cluster of ancient moss-covered stones, but as I reached for it, the atmosphere changed. The scent of pine and raw musk, powerful and foreign, hit me like a physical blow. I froze, knowing I was deep inside a powerful wolf's territory. Through the tangled undergrowth, I saw him. He was colossal, a dark, night-black wolf, utterly magnificent, yet terrifying. Scars, deep and white, ran across his muzzle and flank, speaking of battles won and lost. His eyes were not black, but an intense, molten gold that seemed to burn straight into my soul. He was an alpha, an undeniably powerful one, and he was watching me. I knew the protocol. Challenge meant death. Running meant he would hunt me for sport. I opted for the diplomatic surrender. I did not scream. I did not move suddenly. I slowly lowered my gaze to the ground, performing a primal gesture of absolute submission, keeping my face passive and devoid of emotion, exactly as my father had taught me when encountering neutral, dominant packs. The seconds stretched into an eternity. I could hear his heavy, measured breath, feel the dominant vibration of his presence. He took one slow, deliberate step toward me. Then he stopped. He didn't growl. He didn't shift. His large, scarred head dipped, and he held my gaze for one long moment. There was something in those molten eyes that transcended hostility, a flicker of acknowledgement, perhaps curiosity, even a spark of recognition that made my unshifted body tingle violently. Then he gave a single, subtle twitch of his tail, a movement too small to be a threat, too casual to be indifference. He turned and vanished into the shadows as silently as he had appeared. I collapsed against the stones, the moss forgotten for a moment. I was alive. The encounter left me profoundly shaken, yet infused with a strange, fierce energy. I had faced a true alpha outside my father's protection, and he had chosen to spare me. The smell of pine and musk remained, a deep, primal signature now burned into my memory. It was terrifying, yes, but beneath the fear was a strange, undeniable truth. A protector walked in the shadows. Chapter 3. Seraphina's political clock was ticking. The pack elders, though hesitant to challenge her openly, were pressing for a definitive leader. Within 2 weeks of my encounter in the eastern woods, she accelerated her plans, announcing the Alpha selection, a tournament of strength and diplomacy to choose her future Alpha consort. It was a public and brazen erasure of my rightful claim. The palace grounds quickly transformed from a place of mourning to a circus of ambition. Seraphina had hand-picked 4 powerful, dangerous alphas from neighboring packs, all of whom shared her hunger for control and despised the Silverwood tradition of peaceful diplomacy. 1. Alpha Darius, the Brute, massive, scarred, and reliant solely on physical intimidation. He was Seraphina's clear favorite as he promised total submission to her governance in exchange for the title. 2. Alpha Rylan, the politician, sly, smooth-talking, and focused on economic control. He saw Silverwood as a resource to exploit, using his charm to sway the less powerful betas. 3. Alpha Corvus, the strategist. Quiet and observant, a dangerous enemy who studied my father's old battle plans. 4. Alpha Thane, the wild card, young, reckless, and driven by ego. He cared less about governing than about the prestige of conquering a known pack. Their arrival was a spectacle of overpowering dominance. They rode in with their entourages, their scents, aggressive mixtures of territorial musk and ego, violently overwhelming the palace. They strode through my halls, speaking loudly about dividing up Silverwood's resources. The greatest sting, however, was Seraphina's decree concerning my new role, chief attendant to the Alpha Suitors. You will ensure their chambers are immaculate, their meals are served promptly, and their every need is met, Seraphina announced, her smile brittle. This is your chance, Elara, to prove your usefulness to the future Alpha of Silverwood. It was designed to be the ultimate degradation, forcing me to cater to the very men planning to usurp my birthright. Yet, as I stood by the great hall doors, watching the arrogant Alphas dismount, a cold, strategic calm settled over me. This was not humiliation. This was reconnaissance. Seraphina had inadvertently handed me the access I needed. I was no longer a scullery maid. I was an invisible intelligence officer embedded deep within enemy lines. I would use this forced proximity to learn exactly how to dismantle each of them. My new role was designed to break my spirit, but I immediately recognized it as an unparalleled opportunity. Seraphina had made me invisible, a mere utility, and I would exploit that invisibility to devastating effect. My goal was not to serve them well, but to gather the diplomatic ammunition necessary to destroy them. I became a silent, omnipresent shadow in the Alpha's luxurious new chambers. While I polished their armor, refilled their private wine decanters, and laid out their training scrolls, my ears and mind were hyper-alert. Alpha Darius, the brute. I noted his temper. After a minor setback in training, he flew into a rage, smashing a crystal vase. While cleaning the shards, I found a hastily scribbled note detailing his substantial debt to a predatory northern pack, a debt Seraphina was secretly leveraging to control him. Vulnerability, financial weakness, Alpha Rylan, the politician. Rylan was obsessed with the Silverwood mining operations. While clearing his desk, I observed his meticulous maps detailing how he planned to exploit the pack's copper veins to enrich only his own kin, proving his utter lack of loyalty to Silverwood itself. Vulnerability, economic treachery against the pack. Alpha Corvus, the strategist. Corvus was quiet and rarely spoke, but he was paranoid. I noticed he never drank the water left on his bedside table, always insisting on bringing his own bottled supply. His paranoia led him to talk in coded language with his beta guards, revealing his plan to stage a rogue attack during the selection to eliminate the competition. Vulnerability, calculated deception, and lack of honor. I maintained my flawless composure throughout these observations. My diplomatic training was now a performance art. When Darius insulted me, I simply bowed deeper. When Rylan tried to flirt, I remained stony-faced and efficient. This stoic, unmoving dignity began to have an unforeseen effect on the minor pack members, the guards, the kitchen staff, the low-ranking betas who saw me daily. They saw not a broken slave, but a young woman bearing the unbearable with the quiet resilience of a true queen. "She doesn't flinch," I heard one young guard whisper to another. "She carries herself with more honor scrubbing floors than Seraphina does on the dais." This subtle, earned respect from the lower ranks was a critical political victory. I realized that my servitude was not just teaching me the enemy's weaknesses. It was silently securing the loyalty of the common Silverwood pack member, proving that my Omega heart was stronger and more honorable than Seraphina's beta ambition. My shame was slowly transforming into an unshakable foundation of respect. Chapter 4. My days of serving the arrogant Alpha Suitors continued, but my nights were no longer spent in fearful slumber. The Silverwood Codex and Ronan's silver charm were my constant companions, guiding me toward emancipation. I had gathered enough intelligence to know Seraphina's political structure was brittle. Now, I needed the physical strength to shatter it. Following the meticulous hand-drawn maps in my father's journal, I found the hidden access point to the airy trails. It wasn't a grand entrance, but a narrow, moss-covered cleft in the mountain wall behind the old storage barns. An area so insignificant that Seraphina's guards wouldn't waste time patrolling it. The trails themselves were brutal. They climbed the sheer mountain face, exposed to the elements and designed to be impassable to all but the most agile, sure-footed climbers. Every night, after completing my duties, often reeking of sweat, wine, and cleaning fluids, I would slip away. The transition from the suffocating heat of the kitchens to the biting cold of the mountain air was a shock, but the freedom was intoxicating. I located the training ground my father used, a flat, wide clearing nestled high above the palace, sheltered by a ring of ancient, towering pines. Here, under the cold gaze of the moon, my true education began. I trained not for the brute force domination favored by alphas, but for endurance, agility, and omega speed, as described in the Codex. I ran the airy trails until my lungs burned and my legs screamed in protest. I practiced silent movement, forcing my body to navigate the loose stones without dislodging a single pebble. The hardest part was the attempt to shift. I would stand in the center of the clearing, pushing the energy Ronin's charm seemed to radiate into my core. I would visualize the freedom of the wolf, demanding the transformation. But night after night, nothing. Only a faint, frustrating silver light would trace the outline of my bones before dissolving. My body remained stubbornly human, fragile, and unshifted. Despite the physical failure to shift, the training was transformative. The constant physical hardship, running, climbing, pushing past exhaustion, began to burn away the weakness the servitude had tried to instill. My muscles grew taut, my reflexes sharpened, and the fear that once paralyzed me was replaced by a cold, focused determination. I realized the most critical strength I was developing wasn't wolf muscle. It was unbreakable endurance. Seraphina had sought to weaken my body with labor, but I was secretly hardening it into a weapon. The palace was my prison, but the airy trails were my secret academy, preparing me for the physical test that was surely coming. I was ready to face that test. My training on the airy trails became a ritual of pain and purification. I would push myself until my body collapsed, often sinking onto the cold stones of the training clearing, utterly depleted. I was alone, but I was no longer isolated. The first subtle sign of his return was the scent. Not the overwhelming aggression of the Alpha Suitors, but a deep, comforting signature of pine, rich earth, and a hint of wild musk. It was the familiar, primal smell of the lone wolf from the eastern woods, the massive, scarred alpha whose molten gold eyes I couldn't forget. He never showed himself fully. I would be running the punishing mountain circuit, and the scent would suddenly be stronger, coming from the dense cover just beyond the clearing. It was always a presence, a weight of power that felt less like surveillance and more like a silent, watchful guard. One night, after a brutal attempt to shift that left me weeping in frustration, I woke from a brief, exhausted doze. The air was cold, but beside my head on a flat, clean boulder lay a perfectly quartered, freshly killed venison steak. It was still warm. The offering was undeniable. A hunter's gift left for a wolf he considered worthy, or perhaps in need. I was startled, but I didn't panic. I understood the silent language. This wasn't a threat, it was sustenance, protection, and acknowledgement. I looked up at the ring of dark pines, knowing he was watching. I spoke softly into the silence, my voice hoarse. "Thank you," I whispered, holding the meat close to my chest. "I accept your aid, strange wolf." I ate the venison raw, the rich, warm iron of the blood pouring strength back into my starved omega body. The exchange solidified a strange, unacknowledged diplomatic alliance between us. He respected my strength and training, even in my frail human form. I respected his silent guardianship and his restraint. The silver charm from Ronin felt warmer in my palm, and the primal pull I felt toward that musky scent grew stronger with each passing night. It wasn't just fear or respect. It was an instinctive, deep-seated sense of belonging. The thought struck me with the force of a blow. I was the daughter of the Alpha, serving a wicked beta in my own home, while being secretly protected by a powerful, scarred Alpha from outside my pack. An Alpha whose presence felt more like home than the stone palace below. I knew that this mysterious protector, whose name I didn't know and whose face I only saw shifted, was bound to my fate. He was the only witness to my true struggle, and his silence was my greatest diplomatic shield outside the palace walls. Chapter 5. The Alpha selection tournament was drawing to a close. Alpha Darius, the powerful brute favored by Seraphina, was poised for victory. My secret intelligence, the debt, the treachery, the planned rogue attack, was useless unless I could present it with authority, and to gain authority, I needed a wolf. Seraphina knew her window for eliminating me was closing. She was increasingly agitated, sensing a subtle, inexplicable shift in the palace atmosphere. The quiet sympathy of the low-ranking staff, the unwavering calm in my eyes. She summoned me to the grand study, where she sat with Alpha Darius, both of them radiating arrogance. "The final ceremonial polish for the silverwood crown is needed," Seraphina purred, gesturing to a velvet box containing the ancient, heavy silverwood crown. "It must be done with moon-petal nectar." Darius chuckled, a sound like grinding stones. "That nectar grows only on the Talon Cliffs, Lady Seraphina. That area is sheer rock and swarming with aggressive, starving rogues. Are you truly going to send the little maid there?" "It is a task befitting her rank," Seraphina replied, giving me a predatory smile. "Go, Elara. Retrieve the nectar from the highest, most dangerous outcrop. If you succeed, you prove your dedication to Silverwood. If you fail, the pack is spared the trouble of a trial. You must return before the final declaration ceremony tomorrow evening, or be declared a permanent exile." It was a death sentence disguised as an errand, a clear signal that she intended for me to either fall from the cliffs or be taken by rogues. Yet, as I bowed to accept the order, a thrilling sense of opportunity surged through me. This was not a death sentence. It was my test of fire. This mission provided 3 crucial elements. 1. A valid reason for absence. My disappearance would not be treason, it was an assigned duty. 2. A test of my training. The Talon Cliffs were exactly the kind of treacherous terrain the airy trails had prepared me for. 3. The chance for the full shift. The extreme peril, the proximity to rogue scents, and the physical exertion might finally trigger the primal stress needed for my wolf to break free. I took the small silver collecting vial, my eyes downcast but my mind racing. "It shall be done, Lady Seraphina," I stated, my voice steady, my obedience absolute. Leaving the palace that afternoon felt different from my nocturnal training trips. This time, I walked out the main servants' entrance, past the guards who now met my gaze with a flicker of respect, knowing I was walking toward certain death. I wore my ragged tunic, but beneath it, my heart was a drum of pure, focused determination. I was leaving the prison behind, not as a fugitive, but as a warrior on a necessary, deadly mission. My time as a slave was over. My ascent had begun on the treacherous path to the Talon Cliffs. The ascent of the Talon Cliffs was the culmination of months of secret, grueling training. The airy trails had prepared my muscles, but the cold, sheer rock face tested my endurance and will. Hours later, bruised and lungs burning, I finally reached the high outcrop. The moon-petal nectar glowed faintly, a beautiful, fragile plant clinging to the rock, an impossible reward. I gently collected the viscous, silver-gold liquid into the vial. As I secured the precious nectar, the silence was shattered by a low, guttural snarl. I spun around. I wasn't ambushed by rogues. I was ambushed by Alpha Darius's head guard, a massive, cruel beta named Valen. "Lady Seraphina sends her regards, little maid," Valen sneered, already shifting into his powerful, scarred, gray wolf form. His eyes were pure malice. "She finds it necessary to tidy up loose ends before the new regime begins. Your death will be ruled a tragic accident involving hungry rogues. The attack was sudden and vicious. Valen lunged, his claws tearing at the rock where I stood. I dodged, my months of training paying off. I fought not with strength, but with omega speed and agility, dodging and weaving across the narrow cliff edge, forcing Valen to rely on brute force and risking his own fall. But Valen was too strong, too massive. He pinned me, his heavy weight crushing the air from my chest, his snarl inches from my throat. All the fear, the isolation, the relentless humiliation, and the loss of my father condensed into a single, blinding point of absolute fury. I am the daughter of the Alpha. I will not die here as a slave. The primal pressure reached its peak. It wasn't the pain of the claws or the certainty of death that triggered it. It was the unyielding refusal to surrender my sovereignty. A force, hotter and brighter than the sun, erupted from my core. My bones cracked, not painfully, but with terrifying, resonant power. A blinding flash of silver light enveloped the cliff face. When the light subsided, I was no longer human. My wolf was not small, nor was she the soft healer many expected of an Omega. She was enormous, powerfully built, and cloaked in shimmering, ethereal white fur that radiated the very energy of the moon. This was the Silverwood Omega, pure, rare, and potent beyond measure. I roared, a sound that shook the mountain, a call of Alpha lineage and Omega purity. Valen stumbled back, stunned by the sheer unexpected power. Before he could recover, a black, scarred shadow dropped from the pines above. It was Alpha Kale, the lone wolf. He moved with the focused, brutal efficiency of a warrior protecting his most sacred asset. Our wolves fought side by side, the massive, dark Alpha and the blindingly white Omega. Our movements were synchronized, our defense and attack weaving into an unstoppable dance. This was the true revelation, our sense, his deep, primal musk and my clean, sharp silver, intermingled, forming an intense, magnetic aura that screamed, fated bond. Valen, realizing he was fighting not one, but two true alpha-level wolves bound by destiny, broke. He fled, scrambling down the rocks in panicked retreat. My white wolf turned, heart pounding, and faced Kale's dark form. We stood nose to nose, the silent truth of our mate bond hanging between us, validated by the test of fire. I had finally shifted, and I had a champion. My diplomatic silence was over. My power was revealed. Chapter 6. The final selection ceremony was underway in the Grand Council Hall. The air was heavy with perfume, expectation, and the dominant, aggressive sense of the remaining Alpha Suitors, especially Alpha Darius, who stood victorious, preening beside Seraphina. She, dressed in a gown of severe emerald velvet, was about to make her announcement, sealing my exile and his ascent. The pack elders and the council were assembled, looking tense. Many remembered my father, and the quick political maneuvering felt wrong even to them. Seraphina raised her hand, a smug, final smile curving her lips. "By the right granted to me," Seraphina began, her voice ringing through the hall, "I declare that Alpha—" The massive carved oak doors of the council hall were not just opened. They were slammed inward with a resounding crash. The entire assembly turned, gasping. Standing in the doorway was a figure cloaked in tattered, blood and dirt-stained servant's cloth. My hair was tangled, my face scratched, but my stance was regal, my eyes burning with a cold, fierce light. I was no longer the scullery maid. I was the warrior heir returned from the grave. I strode into the center of the hall, walking past the astonished Alpha Darius, whose scent of triumph instantly soured into confusion. I walked directly to the dais, ignoring Seraphina entirely, and dropped the vial of shimmering moon-petal nectar onto the pedestal where the crown was meant to sit. "The task is complete, Lady Seraphina," I announced, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the power of my recent shift. "I have returned from the Talon Cliffs. I was not exiled, nor was I tragically killed. Seraphina's face went white with fury and shock. You were ordered to return before the ceremony. You are late, and your presence is disorderly. Guards, remove this disruptive servant. The beta guards hesitated, however. They remembered my silent, stoic service. They smelled the faint, powerful aura of my newly shifted wolf. Their loyalty was fractured. I am neither late nor disorderly, I countered, my tone purely diplomatic, yet unwavering. I was delayed by an ambush orchestrated by your head guard Valen, acting on your implied orders, an ambush that failed. I then raised my chin and faced the pack elders directly. You seek a strong alpha, but strength is useless without honor. I have been serving these suitors for weeks. I have witnessed their true intentions. I began to dismantle Seraphina's political facade piece by piece, using the intelligence I had gathered while scrubbing their filth. Alpha Darius is an unworthy leader, I stated, pointing a steady finger. He is financially beholden to the predatory Northern Pack, and Seraphina has been using that debt to control his every decision, selling Silverwood's security for her personal gain. I turned to Alpha Rylan. He plans to systematically exploit our copper mines, enriching only his own foreign family while the Silverwood Pack starves. I saw his maps. The elders began to murmur, shocked by the precise details I could not possibly have known without intimate access. Seraphina lied to you all, I concluded, my voice rising slightly, shaking with controlled emotion. She sought to replace my father's lineage with a foreign puppet, using my Omega rank as a shield for her treason. I endured my humiliation to gather this proof for the preservation of our pack. The hall erupted in confusion and argument. Seraphina shrieked denials, but her composure was broken. My diplomatic strategy, transforming my victimhood into an intelligence network, had paid off, but I needed one more, final piece of authority to cement my claim. The council hall was in chaos. Seraphina, her mask of composure finally shattered, was screaming orders to the hesitant guards, calling me a liar and a rogue. Alpha Darius, his treachery exposed, lunged toward me, his face contorted with rage. "You scheming little servant!" he roared. Before Darius could take 2 steps, the massive doors of the council hall shuddered under an external, powerful impact. A second later, a figure strode into the hall, radiating an overwhelming, true alpha presence that instantly silenced the room, forcing every wolf, including Darius and the beta guards, into a posture of instinctive submission. The figure was the lone wolf. He was fully shifted, not into a beast of rage, but into his powerful, human form. He was tall, muscled, and intimidatingly scarred, with a cloak of dark leather draped over his powerful frame. His eyes were the same molten gold I knew from the eastern woods and the airy trails. He walked past the stunned assembly, ignoring the council, and stopped right beside me. The air between us crackled with the undeniable force of our fated bond, the heavy scent of pine and musk mingling with my own sharp, clean silver aura, a scent marker only true mates possess. Seraphina stared, her mouth agape. Who is this?" she whispered, her voice cracking with pure terror. The man placed a heavy hand, warm and calloused, on my shoulder. His voice, deep and resonant with the authority of 1,000 years of lineage, cut through the remaining tension in the hall. "I am Alpha Kale," he declared. "True alpha of the powerful Nightshade Pack, exiled by a usurper. I have been watching the Silverwood territory. I have witnessed the endurance and honor of this pack's rightful heir." He turned to the Silverwood Council elders. "I observed her. I witnessed her humiliation. She survived your cruelest tasks, not through brute force, but through pure, diplomatic cunning and an unbroken spirit. She is not an unstable Omega. She is a queen." Kyle looked down at me, his molten gold eyes filled with an intensity that promised devotion and unwavering protection. "The bond between us is fated and unbreakable. I claim Elara, the daughter of Alpha Corvin, as my mate and my queen. My pack's formidable strength is now pledged to her rightful claim." The declaration, was the final, devastating blow to Seraphina's reign. The pack saw the truth, an alpha of undeniable power confirming the worth and purity of their Omega heir, whose intelligence had saved them from external exploitation. The pack elders, seeing the political and biological truth before them, bowed their heads. "We accept the bond. We accept the claim," the head elder intoned, his voice heavy with relief and repentance. Seraphina let out a terrible, keening sound of defeated ambition. The guards, now released from her beta influence and facing two true alphas, finally moved. They seized Seraphina and the disgraced Alpha Darius. "No! I built this!" Seraphina shrieked, struggling against their grasp. "She is nothing! She was a slave!" I stepped forward, my hand resting over Kale's on my shoulder, my Omega voice ringing with final authority. "I was a slave in my own palace," I said, meeting her eyes. "But you taught me humility, Lady Seraphina. You taught me to observe, and in doing so, you gave me the tools to overthrow you without shedding a drop of blood. Your wickedness has earned you this fate." She was dragged away, publicly shamed, stripped of all titles, her power dissolving like mist in the sun. The great hall, my home, was finally silent, filled only with the unifying, protective scent of my true mate. The epilogue. The dawn broke over Silverwood, washing away the shadows of Seraphina's tyranny. Lady Seraphina was exiled, cast out into the wilderness she pretended to fear, forced to face the harsh reality she had inflicted upon others. Her fate was decided not by execution, but by the diplomatic shame of public repudiation. And I? The girl who was made a slave in her own palace, rose. The pack elders, recognizing the depth of my survival, my diplomatic cunning, and the spectacular rare power of my white wolf, decreed a new, revered title for my reign, the Omega Queen. My coronation was quiet, centered on the ancient Silverwood Codex and the deep mutual respect between Alpha Kale and me. Our bond was one of true partnership. He brought the strength of the warrior, and I brought the wisdom of the Omega, who understands sacrifice and diplomacy. Our reign began not with conquest, but with rebuilding based on compassion and honor. I never forgot the cold floors or the coarse cloth. That suffering had forged a leader who understood the pain of the weakest among us. The humiliation I went through was the crucible that turned me into steel. My palace was mine once more, filled not with the cold silence of servitude, but the strong, steady beat of a pack restored to honor. I had gone through a lot, and I had done more than survive. I had transcended, reigning with my alpha mate by my side, an Omega Queen who earned her crown from the very depths of her degradation.